process of the Verheugen report was the group which was chaired by Mr. Stoiber, which looked into procurement. And one of the advices they came with was this self-declaration system. Do no longer require that all the bidders present, as from the outset, all these documents, which cost money, time and whatever. The response only 1.5 years ago to that clear advice was to say, well, Mr. Stoiber, this is already possible today under the current EU procurement scheme. And one has to recognize that there is nothing in the existing community regulation which prevents procuring authorities not to require any bidder to provide all these documents. They could move to a system whereby they say, you only need to provide these documents once you have been selected as the preferred bidder. In reality, however, what we have learned is that hardly any of the procuring entities in the EU follow this system. So there is a need for the EU legislator, I think, to come in and to render this an obligation for procuring entities. Otherwise, it will not work. And you will see when we go through this adventure of modernizing procurement, there are many things which could already have been done today under the existing legislation, but they simply have not been done because either there was no awareness at the local level in particular, or there were maybe too many national rules which added to the community regulations, which have rendered the system sometimes also quite burdensome, or because there was simply no interest. Because if you put yourself in the place of an official who is in charge of procurement, in many cities, provinces or regions, they are not that much committed to the best spending of their monies. They were not, because it was not their own money. And if you don't spend your own money, you may not necessarily always be committed to get the best out of it. And this is a change in mentality which we have to work on very hard, either in awareness campaigns or, as Madame Rühle says, by being more proactive in explaining the objectives of procurement, by giving guidance on how to better spend the monies. But also sometimes you will have to intervene through legislation. And that is what we are talking about today. So one of these things I think will certainly come out of the Commission is an obligation for procuring entities not to require all this paperwork to be produced by everybody as from the start. Another very important measure also pertaining to simplification is the field of the e-procurement, electronic procurement. We very much believe that the procurement world should move as quickly as possible into a virtual e-commerce driven activity. Now, of course, the Commission is certainly a facilitator. We have been very active already, and we will intensify our work to render the e-procurement more attractive, and that it should be more used. The key issue here is that in many member states, efforts have been undertaken to render procurement more, so to say, e-like, but they were done on different perceptions and based on different structures, which is causing quite some difficulties on the free movement of goods and services in the procurement world in the EU, because in this virtual world ever more technical borders pop up. And that is our main task, I think, to make sure that these new borders which are built in the virtual world, they should be prevented as much as possible. And when they have been created already, we should do everything we can to take them away. The key word here is interoperability. So in the modernization package, which we will adopt later this year, we will certainly find provisions on the handling of procurement procedures in the e-world, which will focus in particular on the need to create a single market as well in the virtual world, and that no obstacles should be created in this area, which would only render life more difficult. The savings which can be made by e-procurement in terms of administrative burden, but also cost reduction, and also timely processing of procedures are significant. They are really significant, and together with the self-declaration system, I believe and I think that this will dramatically already cut down costs, long delays and administrative burden. An issue which is often mentioned in this discussion is the possible increase of the thresholds. It's a very controversial issue. It seems to many as a first quick fix solution to all the problems. The idea being, if you raise thresholds, less contracts will be subject to the EU procurement rules, and therefore life of the procurers, the bidders, and the citizens will become much easier. We are not immediately convinced that this will be the case under all circumstances. And we were also in particular, so to say, impressed by statements made at our conference last week by the small and medium-sized companies, which clearly voiced against an increase of the thresholds, because they fear that if thresholds were to be increased, that much of the benefits which the 2004 legislation has brought in terms of transparent procedures, in terms of fair treatment, and in terms of access to remedies, will fade away. And the SMEs seem to fear and to believe that without the protection, so to say, of an EU framework which maintains these basic concepts, they will be left in the jungle, so to say, with different regimes in different member states, and there is a fear, therefore, that the application only of the basic treaty principles, which of course would continue to apply, but that these basic principles will not provide sufficient guarantees to SMEs to have easy access on a cross-border scale to procurement contracts. This is of course a message which we should take very serious, and therefore we are looking into this issue with great attention. It's today not clear yet what our final decision on this issue will be. But as you know, there are different opinions. Also, for your information, it was also explained at the conference. It seems that within the Council there is also a split of opinions. Almost 50% of member states have spoken out in favor of an increase of the threshold. 50% of member states are very reluctant to move into that direction. So my feeling is that this will become the big issue, so to say, in the follow-up to the Commission proposal. And at the end, of course, big impact on this discussion will be the results of the impact assessment, which we are currently carrying out in order to substantiate the proposal. And the impact assessment should tell us what the effects would be of a possible increase of thresholds, and we will most likely base our proposals on the outcome of that impact assessment. The use of procurement for other policies, so to say, than just the limited idea of getting the best bids for the lowest price. It's a very important discussion. We are looking, of course, very seriously into this, and I think there is large agreement that procurement cannot continue to play its isolated role as just a sort of budgetary instrument, and that procurement, we have to look at it as a means to also serve other policy objectives. That being said, we should not deviate from the core issues and objectives of procurement. In other words, if major achievements are sought in other policy fields, on environment, on social, and you name it, of course, we should not forget that there are also other means to serve these topics, which may, in many cases, often bring better results than just the procurement policy only. The very important concept here in procurement, and it has already been stressed by Madame Rühle, is the link between the requirements you put to bidders and the subject matter of the contract. This link should be maintained to a certain extent, because otherwise there will be no clarity anymore, no transparency what kind of qualifications bidders should need in order to win a contract. And if these requirements are far away from their expertise and their experience, one could really wonder whether at the end the contracts would be won and given to the best performers. So it's a very delicate issue where we are looking into. It would seem to us at first sight that much can already be achieved by a better application of the current rules, adding some more flexibility maybe with respect to the question of linkage between the subject matter of the contract and award and selection criteria. But my feeling is that we do not need necessarily a revolution in procurement legislation in order to render the procurement system more social and more green.